I was asked to talk some about these crisis support groups. I hope you've heard a little bit about them already somewhere along the way. I came to it from a very unexpected stance. I have been for 50 years wishing that the American public would pay more attention to the fact that we are living unsustainably and that we're going to pay an extremely high price for that eventually if we don't make some significant changes. And I kept thinking, well, as things get worse, people will become more interested and more concerned. And to some extent, that has been true. But the most impressive thing, in a negative way, is that people simply don't want to listen. They don't want to think about it. What we are heading toward is something that we are happier if we don't believe. And unfortunately, what that means is that we put very little pressure on our governments to take any leadership in doing anything about it. So thus far, I don't think there's any move in our government, at least not since around 1971. There was a movement there that had some effect in Congress. But since then, I don't think that Congress has voted for anything that would be sacrificial on the part of the American people to any extent, because they don't think the American people want anything like that. And unfortunately, if that means we just keep on doing 90% of what we've been doing, there are improvements here and there, but they're marginal and not really serious. The future prospects are very dark indeed. I think that a healthy future for the world may not be possible without the cooperation of the two greatest polluters, the two greatest military forces, the two greatest economies. And instead of cooperation, we are barraged with hostile ideas. And so more and more Americans think China is simply not a good partner. So we won't try to be partners with China. Our government hasn't given up altogether, but when you say that, when you approach someone and say that you are our enemy, and then say, let's cooperate, it isn't likely to succeed very far. And that's the kind of situation we have, the best of what we've seen. Now, why are people so reluctant to discuss these matters seriously and think seriously about what would be the wise way to respond? I have thought to some extent it's because we have attitudes deeply built into Western thinking that actually cut against a realistic understanding of what's happening. And I think that is relevant, and that's something I've worked on in the past. But I'm now quite sure that the most important factor is that people feel it doesn't do any good to listen. I can't do anything about it. I won't think about it. I'll go on and enjoy life as it is and continue to act as I've acted and not worry about it. Well, that in some sense is a sensible response, but it's a sensible response that leads to mass misery and destruction. And so it's not really sensible. So I didn't know anything to do about it, and I just kept on doing the same thing I'd been doing. But Bonnie came up with the idea that since we are now accustomed to having groups gather around shared problems. And this is the future of our children and grandchildren, if not of ourselves, is a shared problem that we all face. And we act like addicts. I think we are addicted to the comforts and luxuries that have come our way. And we're addicted to many other things. And addicts need to get together in order to break out of addiction. And people who are suffering from a common ailment profit greatly when they work together. And so when Bonnie came up with the idea that people would be able to be more realistic and even to consider doing things, changing things in a serious way, if they were organized, if they organized themselves into small groups that talked honestly and freely with each other about how they felt, what they hoped for, and finally, what they might do about it. So I have come around at the end of my life to discovering that something I've never been a part of in the past may be more important than any of the things I've tried. Mm-hmm. And the only credit I ask is that you credited an old man with saying, well, let's try something different. I've done a lot of things, but we are still heading more rapidly than ever toward a really, really awful ending. And I think that if we talk about it honestly among ourselves, say that's not really what we want. We really do want to make the changes that are needed. They might happen. And I give whatever time is left to Bonnie to talk to us about what the groups would be like.
Thank you so much, John. And you are such an inspiration that you continue to be adventuresome and try new things and work with new people. And I hope we all can follow in your footsteps in that way. And, you know, it's been such a privilege to get to know you. And John is a great talker, and I love to talk too. And we're just, obviously, he's like one of my best girlfriends. We just get together, we're like, and I think the talking cure works. I mean, there's something about we can't know how we feel, we can't know what we think, we can't know much of anything unless we get together and share with others. And our modern world is crazy, and John has written so brilliantly all the ways in which we live have to be changed. You know, we are, in a word, lonely. We are lonely. We don't have enough family. We don't know enough neighbors. We don't, you know, people have to move, and they, you know, I've lived in suburbs. One of the reasons I came here is I lived in a neighborhood where literally in Southern California, you have you know, a garage opener, and you get in your car and you go to work, and then you open your garage and you go in, and it collects you don't see anybody in your neighborhood, and we're miserable, we're lonely. So I am convinced that regardless of the horrors of the world in which we live, that if we could just get together and talk and share with one another, and then the most important part of all is that we have to eat together. You know, this is how the early church started. It became a profound revolution that has changed the world. And people did that because they got together in people's homes, often women were the leaders, and they always shared a meal, like we've done here today. And I'm sorry we had to sort of watch TV for a lot of our meal. That was really disappointing to me. And as a hybrid experiment, let's not do that next year. You know what I mean? We need to sit at a table and look at each other and talk to each other. But, you know, we did a lot of things today, and we need to experiment. But we just know, all of us in our bone marrow, that we can be family to one another, like family to one another, if we can create a safe place if we can share deeply about what's going on with us, and if we can share what's happening in the world. I don't know about you, but I don't have relatives or friends or colleagues or much of anybody who are willing to talk about the horrors of what's going on in the world. So I really, really, really need one of these support groups. And I have benefited tremendously in my life from 12-step programs and many different kinds of support groups. It's not rocket science. You get together with people, you create a safe place, you have a few guidelines, somebody leads the group, everybody shares, and it's like, even if you never shared very honestly in your family, it's like a contagion. You get around a couple of people who start sharing honestly about what's going on with them. It's like it becomes easy. I didn't never do that in my family growing up, but I've certainly learned to do it with my husband and in many different kinds of support group environments. So at any rate, it's something we can do, and we can come together. We can share about how we're feeling. We can share about what's happening in the world. We have so much propaganda. We don't even know what's happening in the world. So we need to get together to share about books we're reading and movies we're seeing and YouTubes and what's really happening, because it's certainly not what's on television. And that can be really a great source of community building, just sharing different movies and books and ideas. So that needs to be a part. And the most important part is if we just got together and we had a good meal together and we just had an opportunity then to not have any kind of support group guidelines, just have an opportunity to have a meal and talk to people about any kind of ideas. How about we all go to Deb Patterson and make her some cookies and tell her what a great job she's doing? You know what I mean? We could do fun things. It doesn't have to be all, just sort of misery. I have had more fun, and I know my colleague's sister and I have talked about this. We have had more fun marching and doing civil disobedience and hoping to take me to jail. Fun to do stuff in the world, and we can be creative and do different things. So I think it's a wonderful